Hello guys and welcome back to the Pulse Social Sports podcast, where this week we're speaking to Hannah about her time working as a YouTube content creator and also her opinions and experiences on the Youth Junior League involved in motorsports.
It's alright, I'm more than happy to. It's nice to be able to chat about kind of the YouTube side of things and everything I get up to.
So obviously we'll just open out a little bit about yourself. So kind of, you know, who are you and kind of what do you do, where do you come from type of thing?
My full name's Hannah Jane Prydderch. I'm originally from Wrexham in North Wales, but I currently study in Cardiff. I study my Masters in MA News Journalism. And yeah, I always have lived an interesting life. I feel like that's probably extended it too far, but I've had quite interesting few years. Prior to doing YouTube and things like that, I was a youth representative on the Youth Assembly for Wales and kind of did student politics at Lancaster University, where I did my undergraduate in law. And I'd always been a big fan of motorsport. I've got my Michael Schumacher cap there, kind of idolised him my whole life and got into it through watching the races with my family. And then during lockdown, decided with my friend to kind of set up a YouTube channel, and now I study journalism and writing for Inside F2 and kind of getting more into the journalism side of things as well as content creation.
How did you, if you don't mind me asking, how did you go from a law degree into a journalism degree?
It was a strange path. I funnily enough got asked this at my interview for my course. They were a bit like, how have you come from law to that? And it was so we had colleges, kind of like Harry Potter houses within my university at Lancaster. I was the president of one of them, then became the vice president of union development, which is like democracy at Lancaster Students' Union. And then from there, it was just I did a lot of work with student media, kind of was the person they were interviewing a lot of the time. So I kind of went from the reverse. And then I'd done a little bit of article writing previously, but not a lot. And kind of during lockdown, I think everyone kind of had a big chance during lockdown to kind of evaluate their priorities and things they wanted to do. And I was quite lucky in that I'd already graduated. I kind of had to sit down and thought, right, I'll give article writing a go, give YouTube a go and kind of see. And I found that I loved it. And for me, I'd always worried that I couldn't combine my love of motorsport with a job, and found that I had quite a knack for writing. And in the end, I just thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. And then thankfully got on my course and have been able to kind of get more and more experience. But it's quite strange being the person who's come from being in front of the camera to being behind the camera.
That makes sense. So obviously you mentioned that you have this YouTube channel, and so what type of kind of what content do you produce on your channel, and what kind of what do you do really?
So the channel's called The Purple Sector. I run it with my friend Charlotte, who we funnily enough met through a Twitter group of Formula One fans. We mainly cover Formula One, but I also cover a little bit of Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula E, and kind of some other series. So, for example, I did a guide to Le Mans because a lot of people were actually watching it this year for the first time, especially with a lot of sports being cancelled. We mainly do this year. At the moment, we focus a lot more on race reviews because this year was so kind of heavy with the racing, but we also do things like we've done predictions, we've done kind of evaluations of the season, discussions on various topics. So we also are part of a series called the F Series with 5 other female content creators, and we kind of cover all the different aspects of kind of being a fan of motorsport, so things like driver salaries. We've also covered whether Fernando Alonso should return to F1, their point system and all things like that. And it's quite nice because we have quite a balanced aspect. Like Charlotte and I we've both been fans for roughly about the same period of time, but we both kind of have different specialisms. I'm also quite lucky in that I've had a love of the junior series since 2011, 2013, probably about 2012, 2013, and also love of Formula E. And so I was one of the 15 selected for their talent call. So I've also been able to do work with that. And then I also do a little bit of podcasting as well on the side. But the channels are really interesting on getting to cover motorsport in detail and getting to look at kind of all different aspects of it. Primarily not so much the technical side, like I'm nowhere near an engineering expert.
Makes sense. So obviously you're a female creator on YouTube. What's that like? Have you had any kind of issues or challenges or just good moments with it?
The a difficult one. I'd say it's been both the greatest thing I've ever done, but sometimes there are some days where you do wonder why you've put yourself out there to do it, I think.
Mm.
I've been very lucky in that we have a content creator community. I've had a lot of support, like, for example, a lot of our people support us on Twitter have been absolutely incredible. People within the industry have been really supportive. However, you do get some people, and sometimes that aren't necessarily as friendly or as receptive of females. I remember quite early on in the channel, I spoke about this before, but we had some quite nasty messages come. Some came to the channel, some actually came to my personal accounts, and
Mhm.
they were saying, "Why are you bothering to do this? You know nothing," and things like that. And I'm quite lucky in that because I've loved Formula One for so long, my mates joke I'm a bit of an encyclopedia sometimes.
Mm.
I'll whip out facts and things like that, and I'm also quite confident in the fact that I have been a fan for so long. I don't have to justify it to anyone. Whereas I think if I'd have been someone who came to it relatively new, say from Drive to Survive, I'd have felt less confident because there is a lot of people that kind of give you a bit of a stigma for that.
Mm.
But overall, I'd say the reception's been fairly positive. You do get some days where people kind of going at you for having an opinion. Someone disagreed with comments whether Lewis Hamilton should get a knighthood, and they disagreed with what I said. And in the end, I'm like, well, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm just voicing mine. If you want to go voice yours, like go right ahead. I think it's the important thing I always distinguish is where it crosses the line between, yes, you disagree with my opinion, to a personal attack. Like someone
Mm.
frequently liked to address me as a woman in the comments. And I said, would you behave that way to a man? No, therefore
Mm.
stop. And I think it's still a big thing for a lot of female content creators that there is still a level of stigma towards it. And a lot of people kind of thinking that female fans are just there because of the drivers, whereas actually I'm there for the racing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how would you go about kind of, because you noticed on some of your channels and some of your like some of your videos, you have kind of quite a lot of guests that come in. How would you say that you source and choose them?
It's kind of a mix, I'd say. Firstly, Charlotte and I we tend to plan a lot of the channel content in advance. For example, the race reviews, we've kind of blocked them into periods and kind of covered about who do you want as guests. Initially, especially very early on, we did kind of speak to a lot of the content community that we already knew because they're people that we'd worked with and kind of helped to build up the channel along the way. We also look at kind of who's most suitable for the topic. For example, some people might side that, oh, this topic's maybe not necessary for them, or they feel like they would have more expertise. For example, which I think a couple of the returning circuits, there were some people that had watched them originally when they'd been back on in the early 2000s, and we felt like they would be able to provide a bit more expertise about what happened before as to what happened now. We also kind of look at one of the things is kind of the people and the stories that they can tell. I think Jess McFadden's and one of the best examples is we really admired her with her work in WTF1, and we really wanted to be able to speak to her, and especially about her role at the Motorsport Network, because I don't think a lot of people knew about it. People knew kind of Autosport and motorsport.com, but didn't really get what her role was. And we kind of wanted to be able to have a chat with her and kind of tell her stories and kind of show the community a bit more about the people within it, because I feel like very much motorsport is dominated by the teams and by the drivers. You don't tend to see a lot of people without it, but it's always been kind of a collaborative effort between Charlotte and I to look at who's most suitable for the topics, because I don't see the point in having someone on just for the sake of having them on.
Hmm. You did one of your videos where you talked about kind of women on the starting grid.
Yeah.
Without women on the grid, do you think it's important? Like, do you think it's important to have women in the sport and try and get a female driver on the grid at all?
I think, to be honest, it's absolutely essential for the future of motorsport. I feel like F1 should be the pioneer. I don't see It's the one kind of balance I have. I don't see the point in getting a female driver just for the sake of having one.
Yeah.
I feel like there's been a lot of arguments like over the years. I feel like Susie Wolff probably should have got a shot at Formula One. I feel like she had earned it. And I also felt she would have been a good fit considering that her path was through kind of DTM and things and wasn't necessarily through the junior formulas. I feel like Jamie Chadwick could be a good addition to the grid. But I also had the thing of that when a lot of people go, oh, you'll just stick a woman driver in there for the sake of it. No. In
Mm.
any sport, look at darts, for example, is the women can make it up there. Yes, probably I would say they need more help from the grassroots up. We need a lot more girls going into karting, a lot more funding for them going through the junior series. But I feel like at the moment, F1's female representation issue extends far beyond just the female driver on the grid. The grid girls, but it's probably actually the best example, is ironically, they were the most kind of visible women you saw on the paddock.
Yeah.
Is you didn't see, like previously we had 2 female team principals, now we have none. There's not a lot of women you see out there, other than maybe a couple of presenters and a couple of paddock personnel. Is Formula One does have a major issue in that it needs to be able to showcase more of the women that are behind the scenes, the careers that people actually aspire to, and not just kind of, I think F1, when they had the grid girls, they massively underutilized them. They painted them as kind of that stereotypical kind of pretty girls or beautiful. To me, always reminds me of Jessica Rabbit, in that idea of they're only there for their looks and that's it. Whereas a lot of them, to degrees, a lot of them had different jobs, were incredibly smart and intelligent people. And Formula One could have used them as ambassadors for the sport and actually use them even like presenters or to showcase things around the paddock. But instead, by focusing on their image, they valued the place of grid girls in the sense that they made it just so that they were pretty, and then ultimately have meant that a lot of people see women in motorsport like that. And I feel like Formula One, if it wants to go forward, needs to put more emphasis on the incredible women that we have in the paddock. We've seen, due to COVID, I feel like because they've been more streamlined in terms of the personnel they've had, we've seen a lot more women kind of in the higher up positions, kind of making team calls in terms of strategy and engineering side of things. But it's still, even though women, I think, is it, I'm trying to remember the stat now, it was a couple of years ago, they said, I think it was on 40% of the fan base was female, or high 30s, maybe over 40% of fans were female. And like it is with Drive to Survive, that's only grown. But if you look at the paddock, that is in no way representative of the fan base or, to be honest, the talent pool that is available.
I completely agree, actually. I think that's some really good points. Bit of an outlived question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
You mentioned obviously how juniors are working their way up through grassroots of the sport. Because I'm not too sure, what route do they take? Like how does, a junior go, I would like to be on the F1 grid? How would they work up the ladder, so to speak?
It kind of depends on a few factors. Firstly, where you live and also how much money you have. The FIA have this thing now called the Global Pathway, which is supposed to go through karting all the way through to Formula One. So they kind of do tiers. So you would do kind of your regional karting and then UK wide. Some of them, for example, like Max Verstappen, things did European karting championships, and it kind of groups them in ages. And then you get the equivalent of Formula 4, which, for example, Britain has its own Formula 4 championship. Most of the kind of the big countries in motorsport, say places like Germany, Italy, I think Finland does as well. I think Belgium, the Netherlands share one. A few of them will have their Formula 4 championships. But weirdly enough, there's not very much criteria in terms of how you move up. Like there's not a set amount of points you need to get, but normally you need the sponsors to be able to afford it. The thing with the junior series is you pay for your seat and you race for yourself. That's the one difference, I would say. When people say, oh yeah, team calls, we need team calls and things like that, why are they not letting their teammate past? Because they paid for their own seat, basically. They don't have to. It's not the same as Formula One, where they're kind of bound by team orders if they're called upon. And then you would go through Formula 3, which kind of has 2 branches in that you can have regional, so things like British Formula 3, the Formula Regional Championship, Renault Euro Cup, which, funny enough, this at the moment they've had issues and they've streamlined it a bit more. So Euro Cup, which is run by Renault, is combining with Formula Regional, which is what the FIA were running, because Formula Regional wasn't having the greatest amount of cars and teams on the grid that they could have had, and also things like Euro Open Formula. But there is a preference these days to stick within FIA approved championships. Then you would go up to Formula 3 and then to Formula 2. And then the annoying thing is, even if you win Formula 2, it's not like the Premier League where you're guaranteed a promotion into Formula 1. It's very much dependent. For example, this year, Mick Schumacher won the championship. He's been promoted. Callum Ilott, who finished second, hasn't been. Nikita Mazepin, who finished fifth, has been promoted. And previously last year, the Formula 2 champion Nick De Vries ended up having to go to Formula E, and Nicholas Latifi, who finished second, got promoted. They say you can kind of switch across series. So you've also got things like Formula E, for example, which isn't a junior series, is kind of a sister series to Formula One and World Endurance Championship. You can in theory switch across, but most people don't. I'd say the unspoken rule in kind of promotions for junior series is that if you're in the Formula One paddock, you'll make it up. Once you leave the Formula One paddock and go to, say, Formula E or World Endurance, you're basically ignored no matter what you achieve. Look at, for example, Da Costa winning the Formula E championship. He's not been called up to Formula One, which is a shame, because I get why they've done it streamlined, but it's also meant now by streamlining it and showing there's only one path, they've directly benefited richer drivers who can afford to pay either for themselves or have sponsors pay for them, and poorer drivers who don't necessarily have the same level of sponsorship, or working class drivers, for example, won't get the same opportunities because those seats will be so highly sought after, which is why, for example, I say you'll never see a driver like Lewis Hamilton again in motorsport, or at least in Formula One, at least not for 20-30 years, unless they change the system, because Lewis's dad worked 3 jobs to be able to afford his junior career. Esteban Ocon's parents lived in a caravan when he was younger. But then you look at people like Nikita Mazepin, whose dad has effectively bought his Haas seat.
So I just want to say a massive thanks for coming out.
It's alright.
That's all we've got time for this week. Massive thanks to our guest Hannah for coming on, but also thank you at home for everyone listening today. Please don't forget to subscribe to our Twitter, our LinkedIn or our Facebook at Social CIC. That's all we've got time for. We'll see you next time.